Here, so otherwise people won't hear the questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, could you please come up to the mic?
I was just wondering, what is the status of the fatwa against you? Is it still out there, or have you had any problems?
I'm happy to say it's kind of long gone, really. It's been... I mean, you don't look dangerous to me. What is my favorite book? You mean by anybody or by me?
By anybody.
That's, it's difficult. I mean, it's easy to say one of your favorite 100 books, but it's quite difficult to choose one. And it also depends what day of the week it is and what you had for lunch. But, I don't know, the question of the Desert Island book, when I've been asked that question, I tend to cheat and ask for the Arabian Nights, which is like having 12 books in one. But I think the reason I say that is because a lot of the way in which I think about writing was shaped by growing up in the culture of the wonderful tale, the culture in which you know that stories are not true. The stories are make-believe, and that's why it is possible for carpets to fly. And that the truth of stories, the truth of literature, is another kind of truth. It's a felt, emotional truth, not a documentary, journalistic reportage truth. And the Arabian Nights stories are wonderful exemplars of that, so maybe that.
You and I, and most of us here, will recognize that God is a fictional character. As a fictional character, and of course there are various gods, let's take the one with the capital G, is he a good character? Is he an interesting character?
Yeah. No, I don't like him very much, actually. I mean, speaking purely in fictional terms, I much prefer the polytheistic gods to the solo gods. Because the great thing about the pantheons, whether it's the Greek gods or the Roman gods or the Norse gods or the Hindu gods, is that they don't behave well. That they're kind of mean-spirited and vengeful, and their normal technique of lovemaking is rape. There's not a lot of foreplay. And they're angry, and they take sides, and they bully people, and they're vain, and so on and so on. And they're great characters. And what is even better about them is that they don't ask you to do like they do. They don't set themselves off as moral exemplars. They're simply ourselves writ large, with the false, magnified, and so on. And all they ask is to be worshipped, which, what's wrong with that? so I prefer, on the whole, I prefer the polytheistic gods. The monotheisms produce these less interesting characters.
Just one supplementary, what do you think of the writer of that? I mean, there was probably a few, maybe not that many writers.
Who wrote the God? Well, I don't know. The Old Testament it's a mixed bag, isn't it? I mean, there are some extraordinary writing in it. I mean, in the Book of Job, for example, which people even scholars accept that was actually a work of fiction that got put into the Old Testament. It was actually written as a work of fiction. Even its author knew it was a work of fiction. I think that's quite good. And again, it depends which translation. I mean, I'm a great fan of the King James Bible, and I think it is actually very, very astonishing just in its language. So whoever wrote that, the authors of the King James Bible, they were good writers.
Hi there. My question is about Midnight's Children. When you wrote that book, at the time, during the writing process, who were you thinking was the audience listening to this? Perhaps the actual narrator or the whole novel as a whole?
You know, I was just hoping there would be any limits. That's really true. At that point in my life, I had published one extremely unsuccessful novel, and I had abandoned a couple of other projects without ever bringing them to completion, and this was really a kind of Hollywood or bust, you know, this book. And it just struck me that if it could be appreciated by a few people who are not close friends or family members, that would be fine.
Congratulations.
But it is true that I subsequently felt, not at the time, but subsequently, in the light of the wonderful reception of that book, I felt that had it not been a book that readers in India and Pakistan took to their hearts, I would have felt there was something wrong with it. You know, in spite of all its great success in the West, you know, it was written to be an insider book. It wasn't written to be an outsider's book. It was written to be an insider's book. You know, and I think if people in India had not felt good about it, I would have thought, well, then, you know, in spite of all the prizes and all that, there wouldn't have been. Something would have felt wrong to me. And so I guess that the most joyful thing was its reception in India. That really was wonderful. And actually, talk about Salman Rushdie, the thing that I couldn't have foretold is that the book has had a wonderful reception in Kashmir. You know, and Kashmir is a place where almost anything you say will be disagreed with by 12 other people. So to write a novel that people there appear to have liked, you know, appear to feel that it's told the truth about what's happened there, and that's equally inexplicable.
Thank you. I would like to know what advice would you give to an aspiring writer, and how would you describe the writing process?
Well, you know, this thing about advice to aspiring writers, my real answer is, if you need the advice, don't do it. Because everybody I've ever known who really was a writer had some real determination, some fire burning inside them, you know, that they needed to, that forced them to do it, you know, and that they didn't have an option. They had to be a writer because they couldn't not be a writer. You know, and I think what you look for, if I get my share of books by new writers sent to me, and I think what you look for is you don't look for necessarily for a completely achieved work. You know, you're not looking for a masterpiece. I think it's kind of a mistake. You look for something you haven't heard before. You look for a relationship with language, or a relationship with human beings, or with a place, or just something that you haven't heard, something that feels fresh. And if that's there, then the other stuff probably will show up. But most of all, what it means is the determination to do it. In my own case, I left college in 1968. Goodnight's Children was published in 1981. That was 12 and a half years of failure without any guarantee of success. And if somebody were to ask me now if I would spend a dozen years of my life doing something without any guarantee that I'd ever do well at it, I would think they were mad. But that's over and over again the story of young writers, that they actually have that thing in them which prevents them from giving up, which in the end makes them writers, if they have it.